Okay, I think we're just about there, so let's go ahead and let's kind of kick things off. I know everybody is looking forward to the 5:15 giveaway, so maybe I can get you at least out of there in time to make it down to Hall A to pick that up. Okay, so you were in intro, obviously, to Swift for iOS. My name is Michael Crump. I'm on Twitter at mbcrump. A couple of you went to my previous session. I got to meet you again today, and you can see it's a great way to keep connected with me. I have a blog, and I blog about a whole variety of different things. And I work for Telerik, and I work in the developer relations group. I wanted to say congratulations to actually making it to the very last session. And you turned out to be more people than I expected. So excellent. So thank you for hanging around all this time. So kicking things off here, and I've just had this question as I was just standing here, was you know, when did all of these changes start happening with Swift? So Swift, obviously, you know, we'll get into, you know, being a new programming language, but WWDC 14 was when things really kicked off. You know, it happened back in June in San Francisco, and I was there as well. And while I was there, there was a lot of different mixed emotions from different types of developers. And so here is a screenshot of Apple's senior vice president of developer tools saying, "Hey, we have a brand new programming language." And you know, he gave these words like, okay, you know, Swift, it's, you know, it's fast, it's modern, it's safe, and it's interactive. And nobody that was there, and I was in the audience, and nobody that was there had like any type of clue, like what exactly is Swift? What is this that we're getting into? And I remember, you know, for myself being an Objective-C developer, you know, all of the iOS developers kind of started looking like this, and it was like, really, are you serious? We've got to learn yet another programming language. But then on the other hand, we were kind of happy, you know, when we started hearing about stuff, you know, like type safety and things that's in more modern languages that we were going to be able to use. But then as I was looking through the Twitter stream and I was looking at what people were saying, there were other developers, and here, you know, obviously I've met a million different Java developers. They were doing this. They were taking their Objective-C books and they were throwing them right in the trash can. They're like, and it was something that, I mean, I was kind of, you know, the same way, you know, hey, I'm done with this thing. Objective-C, you know, ARC, automatic reference counting, all these things. I don't need this anymore. But there was a couple of things that we did find out though, over the course of time. And it was that, you know, the same APIs existed that were in Objective-C, that they still live today in Swift, except for there's just a different syntax of kind of, you know, getting there and getting to that point. The other thing that I found was that the community right now still speaks a lot of Objective-C. And the question that I get most frequently is, okay, now that you are, you know, now that Swift is out, you know, it's been out, you know, since June. So can I effectively, you know, not learn anything about Objective-C? And unfortunately, there's still a lot of documentation. And some of your first questions, if you do a search for them, you're going to get an answer in Objective-C. So just keep that in mind, that the community is still speaking a lot of Objective-C, but Swift is quickly picking up, and it's picking up more faster than I would have ever believed for it to have done. And the third thing that we really found out was that Swift is evolving. So from the WWDC videos, and you have to have a developer account even just to watch the videos. If you watch those videos and you try some of the code there, you'll find very quickly that a big majority of it doesn't actually work, which is kind of sad. So, and we have Swift now, there's 1.2 beta that was recently released. And as Swift keeps evolving, there's more changes that's been taking place. And if you look at some old like YouTube videos, especially from June and July and August, you'll find that a big majority of that code no longer works. So just keep that in mind with it. So I'm actually a very big fan, you know, of this show over tell. I've been setting where you have been a million times, and I've seen people that had a gazillion slides, you know, with all kinds of various syntax. And what I like to do is within the first, you know, 5-6 minutes of a talk, you know, actually dive in and start looking at some things. And I did this primarily when I started looking at like Stanford's course. They had a course, and you can see here's the popularity ratings. So there's actually three lectures here. These 3 lectures have a lot of, you know, pretty good bit of traction here with popularity. The rest of the 33 courses, you'll see there's nothing there. And I think a lot of that deals in with people don't really like to see tons and tons and tons of slides about, hey, here's how the syntax changed, here's how it was in Objective-C. You'd rather see some code. So this is really the it of my demos. I have a few more demos just to wrap things up. But from here, you know, I'm 6 minutes in, and there's several demos that I just wanted to start showing you, and just start showing you from the very, very beginning. So building some simple apps. Also with that, kind of a tour of Xcode. And you know, if you've been playing with Xcode in the past, you know, there may be some things that you haven't seen yet. So I'm going to kind of give a brief tour of that. We'll look at the Swift syntax, but we're not going to go so deep into it. I'm going to give you the playgrounds. Everything that you're going to see here is going to be freely available. Task is an application that I wrote that's in the App Store. And that's one of the ways that I learned the best, was actually looking at an app that was actually published. And the fourth thing that I really wanted to help prepare you for is Apple Watch. And I wrote an app for Apple Watch that's called an emoji dictionary. And I don't know if you're like me, but sometimes you'll hit an emoji and you won't have any clue what the thing actually means. I mean, I know like the smiley face, and that's like pretty much it. So I wrote an app, and the app will obviously, you know, tell you what the definition of that emoji is, and it'll also transfer it back to your phone as well. So that's pretty much it. So from here, we're just going to dive in and start building some stuff. So let me go ahead and let me minimize Keynote, and I'm going to launch Xcode. So with the first glance at Xcode, and you know, I saw 1 or 2 tweets when I first came up here, and it was like, you know, newbie. How many people has actually used Xcode? Just so I can kind of get a glimpse of it. Okay, good. All right, so I will kind of tailor it mixed in between for what we're going to do here. So at the beginning, you're going to see, obviously, you can get started with the playground, and we're going to kick back into that in just a second. The playground is going to be this interactive area where you're going to be able to try some code samples without actually, you know, spinning up a new project like you might have done in, like, you know, other IDEs like Visual Studio or Eclipse or Android Studio or what have you. And then there's obviously create a new project. Let's just go ahead and click on that, and the first thing we're going to do is we're going to see here, you know, we're going to choose a template for your new project. So we're obviously interested in iOS. For those of you that haven't worked with this before, you have the option to write for Mac as well. So there's obviously the OS X tab here that you can select, but under Application, there's several different templates here. The one that I like to use primarily for lots of demos is the single view application. It's one of the most quickest applications to get started with. So I'm going to click Next, and I'm going to give this a product name, and I'm actually just going to call this one Devnexus. And I have sticky keys turned on. If you see this, you can see where I'm holding down Shift. And the reason I'm doing that is that I kind of have most of the demos and things that I'm going through. If you have Xcode running, you may be able to keep up with what I'm actually doing. So you'll know which modifier key that I actually pressed. So Devnexus is the product name here, and I'm going to just leave the organization name in, and you'll see that it creates a unique bundle identifier. This bundle identifier is net.microcrump.devnexus. The language here is interesting because you can choose to pick between either Swift or Objective-C. And obviously, that means that if you're wanting to write applications still in Objective-C, well, hey, you can still do that. So I'm going to go ahead and select Swift, and for devices, you can go iPhone, iPad, or obviously universal. We're just going to create a simple iPhone application. Core data is something that we may have time to look at in a future demo, and this is basically going to be using storing data on the phone. So we'll click Next, and from here, you know, just looking for a directory, and if we want to put it under Git source control. So we have a project, and now I'm going to adjust the screen a tad here just because of the resolution that I'm running at. Xcode's kind of meant for Retina displays and things of that nature. So we have a brand new project that we've went ahead and we've created. A couple of things that you're going to first see once you first start this application is you're going to see in the middle you have like identities, your build, your version number, your build number. And then if you have an account associated with it, you can start tying that in when you get to the point to where you want to start deploying it. There's targets here. This is 8.1 because I'm still using 8.1 because I was too afraid to upgrade to 8.2 because I didn't want my talk to break completely. But the rest of these I'm not going to go over in too much of detail, but you can turn on things like Apple Pay, for example, with just some switches, and it'll automatically go ahead and pull in those frameworks and get your project started. And we actually use some of these in some of the watch demos. So taking a look at the very first thing here is the app delegate. And hang on, let me get this screen to undo. Looks like the shift key is still on. All right, here we go. I got rid of it there. All right, so from here we have like an app delegate. And an app delegate you can think of as primarily your entry point. And so there's several options here. Did finish launching with it. Most of this you're not going to really need, especially in your first applications when you start working and building out with Swift. You're not going to really need to dive too deep into that. So what I'm going to do is some of the stuff that we don't need, I'm just going to move those out to another folder. And you can think of these, like this one is called supporting files. You can think of these, they're not necessarily physical folders, but this is how Xcode remembers things. So I can actually take my app delegate and I can put it into the supporting files here. And another one that I won't be needing will be like the launch screen. This is the screen that will pop up when the application launches. This is called XIB, that's Xcode Interface Builder. I'm going to also just kind of take that one, move that one out of the way, where we can only focus on just the two pieces for this very first, very simple application. So what we see we have a view controller, and obviously if you're building any type of Apple applications, they follow the MVC pattern, model view controller pattern, something that we've probably all used at some point in life. If you've done any ASP.NET pushes a lot on MVC or some of the latest releases, as well as other frameworks and languages. We have so we have the view controller, and it has a couple of things in here. It has a view did load and a memory warning here. Again, you don't really have to pay a lot of attention to that just right now. I'm just going to go ahead and I'm going to get rid of these comments to kind of make things a little bit easier to see and to understand. But then we'll see that we have a view controller. And here's kind of a document outline that tells, hey, here is our application and here is the view. And the view is what we're going to be working with. So let's go ahead and build our very first, very simple application. So with the resolution, I'm going to kind of have to minimize some things in order to show it. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to bring up right now all we're seeing is the actual screen. This is our very first screen. And I'm going to switch over to the different types of controls. Now, I've met tons of Android developers here that were like, okay, I like to be able to drag and drop my widgets, back and forth. Obviously, you can do that here as well as you can do that if you're developing for Windows Phone even, for example. So what I'm going to do to kick things off here is I'm going to use maybe a label, and I'm going to grab this label and I'm going to put it here, and you'll notice that as I start moving this around, that you start getting the lines here, the lines that kind of are snapping into place. I'm going to go ahead and move that out, and you'll see it snapped in nicely there. And I can change this label to, this is going to be something that's just going to collect input and then display it back on the screen. And I could put something like, my name is, not Slim Shady, and then hit OK. And if I wanted to, there's obviously all kinds of properties that you could set here. And I'm doing this through an interface, just dragging and dropping. Obviously, if you didn't want to do that, you could do that. You could do all of this through code behind. So I've added a label, and this label we're going to hook up in just a minute. And so now that I've added a label, I'm going to go ahead and throw in a text field, which is going to collect the data. Again, we can kind of see the snapping that Xcode 6 provides for us. And it's actually getting a lot better versus where it was at before. And you can enter stuff like placeholder text. You know, if you wanted to put stuff in like, you know, enter your name here, and you would have that aligned, and you may want to put that, you know, of course, centered or right justified, left justified, whatever. And the final thing for this sample is, let's go ahead and drop in a button. This button, I'm going to put it right in the middle here and dismiss that reminder. Outlook is closed. Okay, so this one, we're just going to name this Click Me. And I'm going to expand this window, this button as well. So it's right in the middle. So if I run this application, just kind of as is, you know, I haven't done really a whole lot of anything to it. We got our splash screen, but whoa, we see, you know, hey, we're using iPhone 6. Everything's kind of off, you know, it's way off. You know, we need to do something here. Well, there's obviously you have various different iPhone screen sizes that you're going to have to work with. And one of the easiest ways to kind of, you know, get this up and running and get this working is you can either kind of select all of these, and you can come down and you can go in to add missing constraints. And as you see, when you add these missing constraints, that you have these blue lines. These blue lines help align things because you have 4 different screen sizes that's currently available. There's other ways to do this, and I would not suggest just going ahead and adding the missing constraints and letting Xcode figure it out. It's better to actually, you know, figure it out on your own. And you can do that by holding down the, and you can see the pop-up there, holding down the control button and moving it over. And you'll get these pop-ups that say things like, you know, center vertically, trailing space, equal width, and so forth. But just again, for time's sake, I'm just going to use that, and I think that should get us to where we need to be. So I've added the missing constraints, and now our application looks, you know, fairly good. It's at least showing on the screen. So now it's time to start hooking it up and start adding some more features to this application. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to click on this button up at the top called the Assistant Editor. And by default, you know, I went ahead and I've gotten rid of all of the files that don't really matter, at least for this demo, and we have a view controller. Now we're making modifications to all three of these pieces. So since I'm doing that, I'm going to need to do something like, you know, I'm going to need to create different types of outlets and actions, and I'll go over that in just a second. So here it's saying, you know, insert an outlet. So this is going to be because I'm going to use this in just a second. So according to what naming convention that you're used to, a lot of people are used to the, you know, a label being LBL, text field or a text box being TXT. I'm just going to follow that naming convention. That's not the naming convention that Apple recommends. The naming convention is a little bit different. It's where it's more fully, you're spelling out things, you know, what they actually are. But I find most people are able to understand this better. So I'm going to type in, and I'm going to use, this is just a label for the name, and it added this outlet, and we can see this button here, and it says, okay, we have an IB outlet, week, it's a variable, LBL name, and then UI label. We're going to do the same thing here with the text field. I'm just going to drop that below, and we'll name this one, we'll just give this one the name, enter name. And for the third button that we add, I'm going to drag and drop that one, just put it right here. This time it's not going to be an outlet, but it's actually going to be an action. And I'm going to give this one the name of button click me, and you can see that there's going to be the type of any object. You can also obviously change that, any objects, anything I press through, and then there's going to be a touch up inside, and the argument's just going to be the sender. And here's where it's actually going to stub this out. Again, you don't have to do this if you don't want to. You can, if you would like, you can write all of this code through and then go back and connect your outlets to your controls. But I find it easier at least to get started with this way. So let me just minimize that screen to give us a little bit of a real estate here. And I'm going to go back, and I should be able to just display this one screen. All right. Just move this one back over. Okay, so we have a button, click me. This is again, just to kind of kick things off here. So if we wanted to start doing something with this, it's very familiar, things that we were already kind of used to. If we had the label we wanted to update, we could go, label name.text. And I should be getting LBL name text equals. And we'll just go something like my name is, and we'll add a plus here. Yeah, I think I got something incorrect, but I'll have to look at that in just a second. And we'll add in the text inner name dot text, and I think we're okay. All right, so we've added this. I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to run this app and see how we're doing. So we've got an application. It's popping up this box here, and it's saying, okay, go ahead and enter your name. We can enter something very quick and simple here. It's just my name. But the one thing that we see here is that it didn't actually, get rid of this, the text that we entered, but also in this same application, we can't get rid of this keyboard that's down at the bottom. And there's a couple of other quick improvements that we could actually make to this application. So one of the things is that we could come back into the app and we could type in, for example, we could go with the txt enter name.text and set it to nil. And as you see, it has the IntelliType there that says defines the ID of a null instance. So at this point, that field will be blank. And if I wanted to, there is a override func of touches. Actually, I'm going to back up. There's another function that we'll look at in just a second. But what I'll do here is I'm going to go ahead and add in txt enter name.text and close that quote. Yeah, if you see the crashes here, it's probably because I have a beta still installed. Sometimes the beta is kind of wacky. And if I run again the application, we have a build succeeded, and then we have a name here. I'm going to go ahead and just drop in my name again. It has click me. You can see that it'll tell you right off the bat, hey, I don't understand. What's going on here? We're doing exactly what you told us to do, but here's the only difference. We can switch this back around again, and this is actually a property on the txt enter name that we had earlier. So if we run this application again, now we'll get the expected result. And if I go click me, now we have our name. So one thing I want you to kind of keep in check here is just to remember is that here we're able to, instead of concatenating the strings like we were doing before, we're able just to pull those in. But if you do anything wrong, well, that's just what it's going to display in that box. And the other thing that I was going to add in, and I know people don't like to watch me just type too much, is the ability to go in and actually get rid of the keyboard. So the keyboard is not going to get rid of it by itself. You have to use the touches begin event, which is what I was starting to type earlier, but it was not picking that up. And you'll see that the only thing that I've added to that event is self.view.endEditing.true. So if I run this app for the 4th time, I believe that's where we're at, we have our menu that's popping up. Now I can touch anywhere inside of it and it will start to get rid of it. So there's just a quick kind of breakdown of, hey, here's something that's very simple, but it actually introduces a couple of different concepts of storyboards, to tying up different types of controls, to your view controller, to displaying the data, and actually start interacting with some of the things that you'll hit very early on, which is like your keyboard, for example. And you can change input scopes and things like that if you would like it to only be digits and so forth. So what I would like to do now is I would like to take this project and go ahead and close it, and then come back into Xcode, and I'd like to open up another project. So this project is going to be a playground that I've created. And with this playground, before we get into this, if you've ever worked with any of the Xcode tooling before, then you'll notice that you have the ability to still run and test and play with some of these commands without actually launching Xcode, which is still very, very cool. And so you can just simply run xc run and then Swift, for example, and once you do that, you can it welcomes you to Swift, and here you can actually start typing in things like, here, first name Michael, and hey, the first name, this is a constant. We've determined that this is a string, so string Michael. We could also go in second and just type in my last name here, and then we could let final equal your name is, and then plus first, and we won't add a space or anything to it, just so you can see. So you can see that you're able to start using, you're able to use this, and I use this a lot when I'm just trying to kind of get used to and kind of get the feel of it. So taking a look now at some of the code that's kind of the syntax that you're going to start playing with, and that you'll get, you'll have to become familiar with, and that's going to be just simply be this playground that I created. Now, don't worry about writing any of this down. Every single thing that I've built out was something that I wish somebody had have done for me when I first got started and started working with this. So one of the things that you'll notice here is that we've already went over a couple of these things, but we haven't actually used var. So a var is a variable, obviously, so that is not like a constant, so you can add or change to it if you would like. And there's also no more semicolons. So semicolons was also something that was huge. I mean, everybody, you had to put it in, Objective-C, and people hated it. And so don't worry, they got rid of that. But one of the things that you'll find that's interesting here is that the semicolons still actually work with Swift. So you can play with that if you are so hardcore into adding semicolons back into it. So I've got a couple of different examples here, and I'm only going to pick a few to kind of look over, just because you can play with this kind of on your own. But here was how we were. This is how we were declaring, strings in the past. NS string, my string, at. This is my string. And inside of a playground, this absolutely is not going to work. It's going to do this. It doesn't know what this is. Normally, you get your output over here on this side. So here's an example. I believe this is a good example. Here's an example of where we can start looking at some explicitly declared variables. And over here on this side, here's where it starts printing them out. And you can see, hey, you know what? Here was some number that was an int, and we went ahead and we've changed that value. And so that value now is, the value of some number is now this 54,321. Type inference, here's another example of it where where I'm actually declaring, hey, this is a string, or this is a double, or this is an int or a boolean. I don't have to do that. Now I can just simply give it a name, and automatically it will come out, and you'll see, look, we've got strings. And there's a couple of buttons that's over here, and this is just the output of it, and you can hit this plus sign to start going into your timeline, where you can start seeing some more information. The timelines are really great when you get into especially like graphics and things like that. All right, so I wanted to scroll down and just show you a couple of things that usually blows people's minds when I start looking at the syntax here. So yeah, so I don't know if you've ever thought or wanted your variable name to be an emoji, but you can do that now. So if you want your if you want to use emojis in as a variable name, you can do that. I don't know why anybody would, but obviously in the first two examples, they're very straightforward. In this other example, you can see it's a character. I put in something called dog. Obviously, for example, if I got rid of that and went down to just one, everything would be fine there. We would start seeing our output. So I'm going to just leave this example like it is because I may push it again up to GitHub. So for string operations, we looked at a simple example of that. Again, here is another example of the different types of string operations. And from here, I created a hello world type of thing. This was the way that I was doing it before, you adding in some spaces. But obviously, you can add and give a final total here. So 3 plus 5 equals 8 in this example. And let's look at maybe one set of arrays, and then we'll dig into something else. So for arrays, here's an example of a mixed array. Here I've got Tokyo 3 and true for a typed collection. I've got a list called something called list 1. That's a string, and I've added in 3 strings here. And here's actually the array access. Array access is something that you're going to be doing eventually. And so we will see here, hey, we've got some items here. We've got 3 items. We want to insert an item, English. So we add item there. You can obviously insert it, add a different types of index. You can append to it. You can remove it index, or you can remove last. So I'm going to go ahead and scroll down to the bottom here. Again, you can play with this if you would like. Most of the stuff, if you're familiar, with standard like if, switch statements, they're going to be very similar, except for when you get down here to the bottom. If you look at this switch statement, obviously it's not going to be the same as you may have looked at in the past. Here we have a couple of case statements, and we're going to do a print line here on other. When we have these 3 dots, that's in between those 3. So our first item here is foo1, so it's obviously going to fall between this block here. And if I wanted it to fall between the other one, I could punch in maybe 93, and we could see in just a second 93, 10 through 99 is popping up because it matches that case. Some other things, and I'm going to comment this one out again. We'll go into some classes next. And I find that that at least giving you some exposure to this first early on helps, especially as we dig into some other things here. Functions, very easy to create. Here's a function that is just a greet. You can greet, and I'm passing in a name, and then I'm passing in a day here that's just a string. And then it just returns hello, your name, and then the string. And here's where I'm actually calling that with a greet Michael, today is Thursday. Classes, obviously, again, another something that you're going to be working with. And I took this out of my very first app of what I'm using that I'm pretty sure that you're going to be using as well. We instantiate a shape. And once we instantiate a shape, we have a shape.number of sides, and we set it to a number of sides of 7. And then here's the var shape, well, I got an extra E there, description equals shape.simple description, which is just our method call that gives us a shape with 7 sides. So there is just a kind of a breakdown of the syntax versus seeing that in a bunch of different slides. Again, I have this available for you to check out. So let's take a look at an app. Let's take a look at another app now. I'm going to go ahead and I'll close this window, and I'm going to bring up I'll bring up iTunes. And so I like to look at apps that somebody has published in the store, and this is just one of my apps that I just created just kind of on a on a whim. Hey, this is just something that I thought would be kind of interested to look at, is an app that's in the store that persists data and stuff like that. So you'll see that it's not like a very complex thing. Basically, you got task, you're adding task, and then once you add the task, it adds it to table views, and then it deletes it. But you'll find that there's quite a bit that's actually involved in putting even this smaller type of app together. And it's not because of the language, it's just because of kind of the way that the native world kind of lives. So I'm going to go back to Xcode again. And inside of Xcode, I'm going to begin with starting from absolute scratch, and then we may switch over to the fully built app. But I'm going to go to a tabbed application. I'm going to hit next, and here I'm going to go Devnexus again, and this time I'll just call it task. And when you click next, we're going to create it there, and then finally we have our application. If I go ahead and I run this application, we'll see the build succeeded, and we have a project. Now, automatically out of the box, Apple's already kind of leading you towards, hey, here's your first view and here is your second view. So you don't really have to do any of that plumbing that's behind the scenes. Matter of fact, you can actually come in here if you wanted to, and you could say, instead of first view controller, you could put in maybe like task, and then for second view controller, you could close that one. You would be able to come in here and change this to something like add task. And because these are referenced by the class names, the app would still fully run once you run it. So you have your first view and you have your second view. So let's look at this a little bit more in detail. So we have our main storyboard. Now this time our storyboard's starting to look slightly different. We have a tab bar controller that they went ahead and placed for us. And down at the bottom, you'll see we have a first and we have a second. But if we scroll over, we'll see that there's these two brand new views that's been added for us. And if we go back to the document outline that we were looking at before, you'll see there's a first scene and then there's a second scene. So I'm going to close this window, this document outline, and I'm also going to get rid of this other screen where we have even more real estate. And we'll see, here is our application. Now, you can, if you would like to, you can always zoom out, especially if you're working with a lower resolution, be able to kind of see everything all at once. I'm going to zoom back to 100%, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to go back to the document outline. And in the document outline, in that first view, there was a couple of buttons, and it'll automatically navigate to it. So we don't need this label, we don't need this other label. And inside of the second scene, we actually don't need anything here as well, because we want to start completely from scratch. So I've gotten rid of all of that. So the other thing you'll probably be wondering, okay, so we've got these buttons down at the bottom. If I turn back on my toolbar over here, I'll be able to start modifying those. So this first one, we're going to give this a title of, say, just task, because this one would be listing out the task. And then we have second, which would be something like new task. And so we've got two items that's added in here, but we have very ugly icons. And again, we run this application and we'll see, hey, we've got task at the bottom and then new task. If I stop this application, I have a couple of icons that I've added. And if I go ahead and I come back to images.xassets, a lot of people wonder, what exactly is this? These are actually PDF files that Apple put in there. You don't have to use the PDF files. You can use PNG files if you would like. So I have a couple of files that I'm going to add in here. One of them's kind of got a weird name. It's called report card, and the other one is just new. So I've added these into this application. You can obviously add in the higher resolution versions of it if you would like. And I'm going to go back to the main.storyboard, and I'm going to collapse this window. And under task, where the images had first, I could go the create new. Well, actually, that one would be the one that's got the crazy name of like report card. So I would go report card, and then for the new task here, I would click on this one and I would go new task. So again, I run the application and we'll see automatically, hey, this is working here for us. We have tasks, we have some brand new app icons. There's nothing being displayed on the screen because we deleted the labels. Okay, so how do we start managing this application more efficiently? So we can create a new file here, and we'll just use a Cocoa Touch class. This is built in, and we'll use a subclass of NSObject, and you could name this Task Manager. Again, we're going to be using Swift, so we can just hit Next and then hit Create, and we have a brand new Task Manager.swift that's been added here for us. Now I've got a couple of code snippets that I'll use because I know that watching me type too much kind of drives you nuts, because it drives me nuts watching it. So I can go ahead and I just dragged in a code snippet that I had made, and so you'll see that I'm importing by default UIKit. And when I import UIKit, I have a var task manager, which instantiates a new instance of this class called Task Manager. And then I have a struct that's got two fields here, name and then description. With the, and I've put not defined. You don't really have to do that. I could have used nil here if I would like. I'm just setting up these two variables to be used. So later on I could use task manager.name, .task.name or whatever. And for the other piece of the task manager, I'm going to paste this in, and we'll see here that I've got a very simple thing here. I've got a task that's going to be basically just an array, and I've got one function that I've added in that's just passing in just the name, and it's passing in a description, and then it's appending that to this task. So you can see task, and then we have name, and then description. So that's pretty much it for the task manager. So we've got kind of something in place here, but we don't have anything on our UI. So there's nothing running on the UI yet. So here is where I would come back to my application, and I would start adding things in. So I'm going to go up to the top before I switch over to one of my other views, and I'm going to add in a table view. And so I'm going to just type in here table view, and this is just going to be plain. I'm going to drag and drop it. And yes, you have the nice drag and drop ability here that you don't have to worry too much about it. And so we have a table view that's been added. Now sometimes it doesn't necessarily add it exactly how you would want it to be. Again, this goes back to where you have to start adding in different types of constraints and things like that. So it does kind of get kind of painful. But this is just a standard table view. And if you look at the table view and you compile the table view, then you'll see, here it is down at the bottom. All these lines, maybe they'll show up on the monitor there. So we've got something that's kind of happening here. And the same thing would kind of go with the new task. We would start adding in some different items. So I'm going to go to the piece of this where you don't have to watch me add in all of these different items. So I'm going to go back and I'm going to close this and just pick up with another project that's completed. And I'm going to simply go to Task Manager, Task Application, and we'll open this one. And this was exactly what you just saw just a second ago. We had the table view, and then under Add Task, I went ahead and I've added in a label, as well as I've added in the two different fields here for name and for description, as well as for save. Now, just when in my earlier demo where you saw that I actually dragged and dropped and I started creating the 8 different types of outlets, I did the same thing here. And you'll notice that if I look at like my first view controller, you'll see here's where I dragged and dropped one for the table view. And then if you look at the second view controller, here I didn't change the names again. This is where I dragged and dropped those as well. The only thing that's different about those is that you'll see that I've had to add in a couple of other fields. UI table view delegate is required when you're using the table view, as well as UI table view data source. So those are two pieces that you do have to add in, they're forced to add in. But what else did I actually do? The only other thing that I did here was under table task, I did table task.reload because I wanted to reload the latest data every single time that it launches this application. And underneath the different types of functions, this is a required function of using table view. And you'll notice that if I take this one and I comment this out, and I come back to the other one, and I comment that one out, that up here it starts to screen saying, hey, you know what, we've got problems. So, you know, it says, hey, it doesn't conform to this protocol UI table view. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to uncomment both of those out. So the first one was very easy. It says, hey, give me the number of rows in the section. It was easy to say, okay, this is taskmanager.task.count. And again, this is coming from the taskmanager.swift file that we made earlier. And then when it comes to the table view in and of itself, you'll see that I've only really done just one thing here. I've went ahead and I've added in, you have to add in like a cell. So I've let cell equals UI table view cell, and don't worry about this syntax. You'll find a million examples of this. And I'm using the subtitle type of syntax. In the reuse identifier, you can give it any name you want. I'm just giving it default task here. Once that's in place, let me bring that back over, you will be able to go ahead and start setting the text, and then you'll also be able to set the detail text. So in this instance, I'm using taskmanager.task, and then I'm getting which row that I'm currently on, and then I'm adding a .name. The same thing kind of goes for the description. Again, the .name and the .description, if you come back over here, that's where that data is coming from. So for the first view controller, that's it. And the other thing that I've added in is this one is not required, but this is the commit editing style. And you can actually hold down, usually you can hold down, maybe I'm just not showing it right now. Yeah, there it goes. You can hold down the option key here, and you can get like a question mark that can give you some more information on it if you would like. Here I'm saying, hey, if the editing style is UI table view editing cell .style.delete, and I could take that delete, here's an example of it popping that up. Hopefully I can get rid of it now. Sometimes once you start it, it doesn't go away. So this is for delete. If I wanted to add in, there's also ones for insert and none, and then just the raw value. If it's going to delete, I'm going to delete that row, that item at that array that's just simply called in indexPath.row. And then I'm going to reload the data again. For the second view controller, still fairly simple stuff here. We've got a couple of text fields that we've added to the screen. And since we've already have a reference to them here, whenever they click on that button, I can check to see if it's blank. Else, I can go ahead and add the record. So I can give it, here's the name, here's the description, and then I can call the task manager, which is basically my helper class .add task, passing in the name, and then passing in the description. I'm going to go ahead and I can dismiss the keyboard here, and by calling again the self.view.end editing set to true, and then clear out the elements. Now I did go ahead, in case they did not click this button, I did go ahead and give them the ability that if they wanted to click on touch as began, that it will call that in editing as well. And then should they choose to hit the return button, then it's going to go ahead and dismiss it as well. And you can do that by just calling the resign first responder. So I'm going to click on add task, and I could add in something here. I'll just go ASDF. Obviously you may want to add something more descriptive than that. And if I click on the task, you can see the task has been added here, but if you start swiping from the right hand side, you now have the ability to delete it. So in this example, it's fairly simple. It's something that's kind of to get you up and started and to get you running. But one of the things that I've added into this is I've added in core data. And in the code that I'll give you in just a second, you'll see that you'll be able to persist this data by just adding a couple of lines. And if you make a check mark in the use core data, then it'll go ahead and it'll stub out that for you, where it makes it a lot easier to get up and running. Okay, so I have a couple of other things that I want to show you. So let me go ahead and I'm going to stop this application. And again, like I said, I've got the code for you if you want to check out a persisting of data there. And this version of Xcode I've actually got to quit out of completely, and I'm going to quit out of the simulator because I've got the beta that we're going to run. So I'm going to open up the beta version of Xcode, and I'm going to bring up one of my other projects, and this was kind of my emoji dictionary type of project. Because a lot of people have been asking me, especially as I've been talking about Swift and kind of trying to get people up to speed. You only get 60 minutes or so to kind of go over everything. The watch seems to be something that's very popular. So I built this very simple kind of app. And I did this where you could kind of see the different, what all is kind of involved here. So we have a couple of different projects, and this is iOS 8.2, which just came out on Monday. You now can actually download it and put it on your phone. So we have an emoji dictionary here. This is the actual app that works on your phone. And one thing that you will have to kind of get used to is that you have to actually create an Apple app, and then you can create the watch app afterwards. And some people don't like that. And you can obviously do that by going up here to File and then Project. And if you go into, let's see here, actually I think it may have been in File, or I may have already added it. Let's see here. Thought it was in that. Yeah, here it is. So you can go to iOS, and here you can start adding in like a storyboard or notification file. So what I've done, here's an app, and we have like, we've got about 10 minutes, and I'm going to jump into a few more slides, and then we'll kind of go from there. We have the app delegate, which I didn't actually touch at all in this application. So there's been no changes there. But I have created, and I have started adding in some data for my view controller.swift. So maybe before I actually show you this, it may be best to actually let you see this one in action. And sometimes it's a hit or miss as far as the simulator goes. So yeah, the simulator has been started here, and I'm going to go and let's go to hardware. And you have to turn on this external display. So here's the actual watch app back over here. It's located right here. These are the different emojis, and you can see here. Let me change the scale. This thing. Edit. Oh. Well, maybe it's not showing up. If I select one of these, it will automatically come back and it'll say, hey, this one is, face with tears of joy. And in the iPhone simulator, if I can get it to run properly, it will transfer that over to it automatically. So here's where the actual extension comes into place. And I have a interface controller. And so when I was starting to test out and start building this out, the very first thing that you're obviously going to want to do is you're going to want to start looking at how's the storyboard going to look. And here is the actual storyboard that I've created. It's just a table, and then I've added in this is just a cell here, emoji row, and then I've added a group, and then there's another label that's inside of that. So there's a couple of pieces there, and then on the second screen, what I'm actually doing is it's just two labels. The emoji, and I've just stubbed out some code here, and then there's a label down at the bottom of it. And the code to this, obviously, I created an emoji row where I had access to this label, and then in the interface controller, I started setting, hey, here's my ranges, and these obviously are the hex ranges, and I had to look these up to actually figure out where these emojis lived at. So I have the list of emojis, and I can start going through the range of all these emojis and start just appending them. So I appended them all, and then in my table, again, we're looking at the same kind of stuff here. Self.table.set number of rows, emojis.count with row type emojis, and here's just a for a for loop here that I'm adding in all the different types of emojis. Again, there's another one, did select row at index, which is when they click on it. And when they click on it, I'm going to push controller with name, which means I'm just going to basically push my other controller, which is my zoom emoji controller. And inside of my zoom emoji controller, you can see there's quite a bit of code in here, but this basically just goes out and it transforms that emoji and grabs the text out of it and displays it in a friendly form. And once it does that, it saves it down here. You can see using NS user defaults, and it saves it to this entitlement that I've added in to just group.net.microcrump.emoji dictionary. And it'll transfer that over. That allows us to be able to talk from one app to another app. So with that being said, I believe I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to jump back to the slides, and I'm going to show you where you can kind of get this at. I know this is a lot of code, but I at least wanted to give you some sort of exposure to the watch, because I think that's kind of important, and that way we can kind of finish up here. So I was going to run it one more time, see if it would run, and I'll go back to the simulator. Yeah, the simulator's acting goofy on me. Okay. So finishing a couple of things up here. Play and okay, so as far as resources go, there's a couple of places that I found that's just absolutely vital for help. Swift is in the iBooks application. You can go there. That's where you can download 2 books. And if you download both of those books, then you'll have absolutely everything you really need. The other thing is Stanford Swift, which I showed you earlier. That set of screens, actually watch them. And also you can download the PowerPoint slides as well for those as well, and you can check those out. That's a really great course. You just have to make sure that you follow all the way along with it. It's led by a great instructor. There is a blog. The official blog now is up and it's running, just developer.apple.com Swift blog. And then everything that you've seen today, it's a lot more than for a 60-minute presentation. It's more like a 4-hour workshop. But I put all of the slides and source just at this one place, just github.com, mbcrump, and then Devnexus 2015. You'll also get resources to my other talk if you didn't get to go to that one. So that's available as well. A couple of other things that I just wanted to throw out here is I help and work in part of developer relations, and also help out with the team that builds UI controls. And if you want to check those out, we've added a couple of missing controls from the toolbox. Telerik allows me to come out to these conferences, so I like to at least let people know about that, as well as know about NativeScript. A couple of you were in here for the NativeScript talk that was just a second ago, and the reason I find that this is interesting for people is that NativeScript allows you to create iOS, Android, and soon Windows applications by using XML to define your UI, JavaScript to define your logic, and CSS to define your style. Finally, we have a conference that's coming up on May the 3rd through the 5th in Boston, and it's just called Telerik Next. So with that being said, I know it went pretty fast. I tried to go through a couple of things. I want to open the floor for questions, and I really do appreciate you for hanging around and at least give you a little bit of time to head over to Hall B. So if anybody's got any questions, and I'll be more than happy to take them now. We can chat, or we can just come up and chat. Or I can show you some more stuff. All right, thank you. Yeah, appreciate it.